Just pull back and push forward and run them over. Two guys are laying down. 142nd, man. What city are you in? Compton, I think. I just passed by. They were fighting in the still there? Yes. We tried to follow the truck when we took pictures, but we don't know if we got that plate. What's the location? It's 142nd and Central, ma'am. I don't know where you are. We're not in Compton, okay? So okay, well, I'm giving you the address. It's 142nd and the street is Central. Rosecrans and Central. Okay, if it's better for you. What's your phone number? Sheriff? Yes. Okay, I'm going to disconnect. Ma'am, do you know the kind of...
Downey Rescue 445, be advised, we have a confirmation of one auto versus Ted, 142nd is Rosecrans.
45-10-4, and you're confirming that it is at 142nd and Rosecrans, 10-4, auto Ted.
The infamous Suge Knight, one of the more scarier figures in hip-hop, former football star and bodyguard turned mogul. A 6'2" tank who is currently serving a 28-year sentence at R.J. Donovan Correctional Facility in San Diego for voluntary manslaughter after running over two men at a Tam's Burger in Compton and ending the life of one of them in the process. At the time, Suge was said to have quote-unquote visited his former business partner Dr. Dre on the set of a promo commercial being shot for Straight Outta Compton back in 2015. It has been alleged that people were calling Suge and letting him know that the movie was very reminiscent of Death Row Records and that it was essentially becoming a Death Row movie, with even having someone play Suge Knight beating people up in studios and such. Therefore, Suge felt that he was owed money and he went to collect, which has been the common thread for most of Suge Knight's confrontations. So he paid the set a visit, but was basically kicked out by security, or rather asked to leave, because things quickly escalated into a shouting match. Now Clay Bone Sloan, who was acting as a technical advisor for the film, confronted Suge Knight to make sure that he left the premises. Shortly after Suge left, he made a pit stop outside of a Tam's Burger parking lot where he was confronted and had a physical altercation with Bone while still being inside his truck. In the security footage leaked by TMZ, which I will not be showing in this video due to the gruesome nature, you can see Bone approaching the car, and this is where the alleged punches were being thrown. The reason for Bone throwing the punches was because Suge Knight was allegedly bad-mouthing him. But then watching the video, you can see Suge Knight backing out with his truck, hitting Bone as quote-unquote self-defense. Now where Suge ran into trouble is instead of backing out and driving off, he ran into him again, where it appeared that he attempted to finish the job while also running over Terry Carter in the process. Now Bone survived despite sustaining serious injury, but Terry Carter, who was a music executive and an actual friend to Suge Knight to whatever extent, didn't. Now what's interesting is that Terry was never meant to be there or at least get hit. He was caught in the crossfire. Now there's different variations to the story and a lot of he said she said, where there's been stipulations and claims that Suge didn't actually hit Bone the first time and that he actually slipped, or the fact that he was on the phone with Terry after he left the set who was trying to mediate the situation, or people have suspected that perhaps it might have just been a setup, etc, etc. But we will go with the version of him just hitting the two men, because regardless of the minute details, as mentioned, Terry was Suge's friend, or at least someone who he respected, who did lose his life. And most of us know, and if you didn't know, now you do, this wasn't Suge Knight's first violent offense. This, however, was the nail in the coffin, a decline that finally reached the end, but this was preceded by many pitfalls in the years prior, particularly the fall of Death Row Records. Now before we get into the fall of Death Row Records, we need to gain more context and understanding of Suge Knight, the heart and soul of the label, as some might say, the beginning.
And I've always been the type of person where in class, I always been one of those, I want to make my own shit up. Like if the teacher say, well, write this, and you know, we finna have a spelling test and we finna do mathematics, I be like, I ain't doing it. Then they say, well, draw something, tell us something, and tell a story. I get to tell them, look, I'm gonna be a president here, I'm gonna do this. I always been the type of person that just have a dream of having a whole bunch of shit and bring all my friends along and make something happen. So I always want to be, I just want to be me. I never just set out to say I want to be this, but football was my goal. And when I got to that level where the football was, it was like for a lot of athletes and the coaches, it was a whole different twist than I thought it was. So it sort of disappointed me, so I decided to do something else.
But it sounded like you always did have the dream in mind to be the head of, and like you said, bring you people along with you.
Yeah, I felt that family and unity and love is the most important thing you have.
The beginning of Suge Knight. Suge Knight, born Marion Hugh Knight Jr., was born in Compton, California, April 19th, 1965, the youngest of 3 siblings. The alias Suge was derived from his childhood nickname, Sugar Bear. Raised in a lower middle class neighborhood in Compton with 2 working class parents. And I think it's surprising to some because the perception is that someone like Suge, or at least the narrative with a lot of black men that end up entangled in the justice system, is that they're usually coming from a broken home with a single parent, majority of the time the single parent being the mother. But this was not at all the case whatsoever for Suge. He was in a household with both his mother and father. However, it is true that the same couldn't be said with the friends and people he grew up with in Compton. Suge was the exception, not the rule. Now, Suge Knight's gangster reputation within the industry was an active choice on his part because, as far as we know, he did not grow up that way either. The prominent male figures in his life growing up, whether it be his father or uncle, weren't gangbangers. He did, however, grow up in a place like Compton where gang activity was prominent, and in his neighborhood in particular, it was run by the Bloods. But that wasn't supposed to be his fate. It was supposed to be football. Though Suge grew up with both his parents, he still didn't live in the best environment. I mean, he wasn't rich, so since he was a kid, he always knew that he wanted more, and the way to get there was through football. Now, Suge went to Linwood High School, 20 minutes away from Compton, where he was both a football player and a track star for the 4 years. Now, this was in the 80s where Suge was focused on his athletic career, so much so that after graduating high school, he earned himself a scholarship for football at El Camino Junior College, where he played for 2 years before transferring over to the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, otherwise known as UNLV, playing for the Rebels team after meeting Coach Hyde during recruitment, who then brought him to Vegas. According to an Andscape article written by Justin Tinsley, quote, as a junior, Suge started at nose guard and defensive tackle and immediately became one of the Rebels' best defensive players. Knight was voted UNLV's Rookie of the Year, named defensive captain, and won first-team all-conference honors. In a city full of sins, Knight was apparently UNLV's biggest blessing, end quote. And at the time, Coach Hyde claims that Suge was well-mannered and a type of player that any coach would want on their team. A yes sir, no sir type of guy. Now, Suge ended up playing 2 seasons at UNLV from 1985 to 1986. And at this time at UNLV, he was working as a part-time bouncer for a local nightclub called the Cotton Club, which will be relevant later in this.